Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining for this virtual community tree survey training. My name is Meredith. I see some familiar faces, but some of you I don't know. And I manage the Invasive Vines program with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. We're funded in partnership with Casey Trees. Um, and tonight we're going to be talking about tree surveys and sort of the purpose of them and how we do them. So I put together a little agenda here. I mentioned in my email, I'm hoping to keep this pretty brief. This will be, an informal chance for you guys to learn about, what a tree survey is and how we do that here at CCAN. And give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm hoping to just spend about 30 minutes going through these slides and then use 15 minutes for Q&A. So please save your questions for the end, but this shouldn't be too in-depth, for everyone. So we'll go a little bit over the program overview and mission in case you're not familiar with our program and what some of our goals are. I'll talk about why we're surveying trees, what is a tree survey, what it is not, and why we're surveying trees now. I'll go over some tips for identifying trees being threatened by invasive vines. However, I'm not going to get too in depth with different species of invasives. That's something that's, I think, more practical to learn in the field. So if that's something that you want to learn more about or you haven't done as much work with, I'd recommend attending one of our events or a similar event with the Weed Warrior program to learn more about vine identification. So I'll briefly talk about a few species that we're looking for, but I'm not going to spend too much time talking about invasive species. And then we'll talk about where we're surveying, both at our CCAN events, and then where you can be surveying independently as well. And then we'll do some Q&A. Awesome. So let's dive right in. So this is our program. It's a new program as of October of 2024. And like I mentioned, we have a funding partnership with Casey Trees. Our grant objectives being to mitigate and remove invasive vines from at least 300 trees, and I should say bigger trees. We're looking for bigger trees on private lots and 800 trees on public lots. So that's sort of our big umbrella goal. We're accomplishing that through a lot of different means. But one of those is supporting these community-led efforts, for folks to control invasive vines in their own communities in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I'll identify what those communities are that we're working in. But those are sort of our two overarching goals of this program. So we've been holding a lot of events since October, removing a lot of vines, talking to people in communities who want to do this type of work, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far. Awesome. Cool. So why are we surveying trees? So, if you've done any like citizen science work before, with iNaturalist or similar things like that, you know that citizen science helps us to collect data on a large scale. So, really with this survey, we're looking to identify trends in invasive species. So seeing where, are areas where we're seeing a lot of invasive vines, and that's going to help us sort of inform our program priorities for this year and beyond. So really, it's to help define the scope of a problem within a geography, and it's helpful for me to have other folks who want to do surveying. I think it's kind of a fun and different kind of way to volunteer, other than attending a volunteer event. This is something similar to iNaturalist that can be done, pretty independently, and just a way for me to get more boots on the ground and more people covering more geography than I could on my own 2 feet. And then particularly with invasive vines, now is really the best time to be surveying trees. So Jeff is on this call. I'm going to call you out, Jeff. Jeff has been helping me survey for some time now. And I think, you can definitely agree that it's easier to see these trees this time of year before they leaf out. It's easier to see the vines. It gets much more difficult, in the summer when you've got tons of stuff growing and you're like, what am I looking at? Is that a vine? I'm not really sure. So definitely, this next month, we're really prioritizing this with our program, so that we can get enough data to inform our program for the rest of this year. Cool. So, what is an invasive vine survey? So there's lots of different types of tree surveys that arborists and other experts in the field do. But this survey we're primarily focusing on where we see trees that are being threatened by invasive vines. It's that simple. So really what this looks like in practice is taking a walk around a neighborhood and entering data into an online form. So the form populates onto this map, which I'll pull up in a second here. But I want to make the distinction that this is not a comprehensive tree health survey. That's something that would need to be done by a certified arborist. We're not looking at different health indicators with trees. We're simply looking at whether or not this tree is moderately to severely affected by invasive vines to the extent that we would want to go in and remove those so that this tree does not die imminently. And I'll talk about what I mean by moderately to severely affected in a moment here. But really quickly, I want to just pull up this map so you guys can see kind of what this will look like once you go out and do your surveying, where this populates. And this is a great, tool that we have from Casey Trees. A big benefit of having, that partnership is that they have a super robust GIS program, and they built this map for us that we're able to use for this program. So you can see we've got some dots here. Don't the various dots mean. But the green dots are the results of the survey. So I'll zoom in on Riverdale Park because this week I've had a good group of volunteers out there with me surveying this community. And we've gotten a ton of data and it's been super awesome. It's really satisfying to be like walking around and then look at this map and be like, wow, look at all those trees that we found. So this has been our focus for this week. I'll talk about where we're going to be focusing in the future. But this is kind of what it looks like on the back end once we go through and do that surveying. And then you'll see red dots on this map too. Those dots are where we've actually removed vines. It's not all up to date. I will say I have a lot of data I need to put in this map, but it's fun. It's interactive. So like when you click on the dots, it'll show up what the address is and sort of the other things that go from this form, which I'll show you the form in a moment here. But just wanted to pull that up from the back end. Okay, I want to save that other point for a little bit later because I don't want to confuse people too much. All right, back to this. So great. All right, so spotting invasive vines, like I said, this is the best time, to do this because they're so easy to spot. They're English ivy, which is the main species we're looking for, is an evergreen vine. So it's green all year round, whereas most trees, their leaves are dead this time of year, except for, trees like the American holly or some coniferous trees that you'll see, but it's pretty easy to distinct those two. Usually when you're looking at English ivy, you know that that's what you're looking at. So I just took this picture today. This is in a cemetery right near where I live. This is a pretty clear spot. Sometimes it won't be as clear as this. Like you'll just see like the top part of the tree poking out, or you might just have to like, get a good angle on it. But this is really what we're looking for here. This tree is, really in need of some help, clearly. So these are just some tips from the surveying that I've done that's been helpful. So usually, when I'm picking an area that I'm going to survey or I'm picking a couple streets, I'll walk each street twice to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and try to be kind of clear about what street you're doing. It's tempting to be like walking and be like, oh, I see one over there. Let me go, but I try to just sort of keep it on one street at a time. In the city, it's nice because we have alleyways, so it's easier to like get behind houses. This gets a lot trickier. I was out in like Springfield, Virginia, surveying last week, and I was like, oh man, this is a really different ball game because people had much bigger properties, and so it was trickier to tell kind of like what trees were on whose property. But if you're able to access the back of the houses, that's a good practice for that. Something else that's been helpful for me, Google Maps, when you click on people's properties, it'll tell you what house number it is, because sometimes that's hard if you're like behind the house and you're not sure which house number it is. You can use Google Maps for that. Or in DC, again, I think some places in Maryland have this too, they're sprayed on the trash cans out back too. So I'll look at those sometimes as well. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, if it's green, it's probably English ivy. But, I always say like count if you're unsure. I'd rather have, too much data than not enough. So if you're like, I think that's on this house, but I'm not sure. I think that's enough English ivy, but I'm not sure. I'd rather just count it. That's sort of stuff that I can sort out on the back end of the data and when we actually send volunteers in. So, yeah, I'd rather have you count something than not count if you're unsure. And I'm sure there will be questions about this, but well, hopefully I'll explain some of them now. Cool. So this is what we're looking for when we decide whether or not we're going to count a tree. Like I mentioned, we're looking for mature trees. So we say, 10 or more years of age generally. That's pretty broad. I mean, I can't look at a tree and tell you how old it is. Most people can't without actually cutting it down. So we say like 25 inches in diameter. Just look around and look for some trees. If it's big enough to be covered in vines, it's okay to count it. We just don't want to be, counting a lot of like really, really small trees. So we say about 10 years of age. You could think 25 inches diameter. Um, Health, we're looking for generally healthy trees. At our events at parks, we will cut vines from trees that are dead. There's definitely benefits of that as well. But in terms of people's homes, we're looking for trees that are generally healthy. So you can look for, these signs of poor health. If it's a snag, if it's clearly like cut off at the top, we wouldn't count that tree, assuming that, probably the person's gonna have to have that removed eventually, etc. So vine pressure, this is kind of the big one. Our grant defines our work as working on trees that are moderately to severely affected by vines. At least 50% of the trunk is covered in invasive vines, or we've seen the vines that are growing up into the canopy, at least to the lower branches, is what we're looking for. And on the last training I was doing for this, someone asked me like, well, isn't it beneficial to remove it even if they haven't really grown up because we would want to stop them from, maturing and getting to that point, like that picture I showed. And yeah, I mean, definitely we want to do that. However, that's just not the goal of this program. We're looking to save trees that are so affected that they're going to die imminently. So for this data set, we wouldn't count those trees. However, like of course there's a benefit to, removing English ivy before it gets to that stage. It's just for this particular purpose, we're not going to be counting those trees. Um, Cool. And then access, I try to put a couple other pictures in later in the slide to show what I mean by that. But when I'm looking at houses, I think like, would I want to go up to this house and remove those vines? Like, could I send a volunteer up to this house to remove those vines? I think especially in DC or more like condensed areas, I've seen a lot of trees that are like crammed between a fence and someone's shed, or it's just like it would be really hard to access that. Like, maybe it's on a super steep slope that seems kind of hazardous. So, just consider that aspect as well. And if it seems like it'd be something that's really tough to access, maybe you don't count it. And then species I put on here with a question mark because I really don't want people to worry about that too much. Like obviously we want to save, our native trees. And so something like tree of heaven, that's an invasive tree. If you see a tree of heaven that's covered in English ivy, we don't worry about that as much. But I think that would be more difficult to consider than it's worth. So I would say don't worry about that one as much as the other categories on here. Cool. All right, so some examples I put in really quickly. This again, I took these today just walking around my neighborhood, and I found this big tree covered in English ivy. So this is something that we would clearly count. Like you can see the vines have grown up into the upper canopy. Relatively easy to access back there. This is a mature tree. It looks pretty healthy, other than the fact that it's covered in English ivy. So we would definitely count a tree like this. This, on the other hand, on the right side, is something that we wouldn't count. It's got some ivy on the ground. It's just starting to grow up this tree, but I would not consider this to be moderately to severely affected. Okay, and then this was my attempt with like an access sort of example. It's tough, and sometimes I'm not really sure, myself which ones I would count, which ones I wouldn't. So this one, when I first looked at, I was like, oh, maybe that'd be a little tricky to access. But I mean, really, all that's happening is it's split between this fence line, and we've got these pallets kind of leaning up against it. But I still think that would be easy enough to access that I would count it. Usually, there's a part I'll show you on the form where you can put in notes. I would just put on the note like this tree split between two properties, and then that's probably a situation when we go in, we'd have to talk to both of the property owners in order to remove those fines. But I would still count something like this. I mean, clearly I was able to get right up close to this tree, so it's easy enough to access in that sense. And then this is really hard to see, but there's a tree back here that's like crammed between this fence and this person's shed. And I was looking at it because I saw the top part that was covered in ivy. But that's not something that I would count because that would just be like so hard for someone to get to without like proper tools and equipment. So if you see something like that, don't count it. Sweet. All right. So this is the form that you'll be using to survey. I'm going to pull it up and just kind of go through an example point here. But this is sort of the meat and potatoes of how we do it. So it's a really simple form. It's essentially like a Google form. The first part is location. So you'll want to have like location services on your phone. A couple of volunteers have like had it turned off on their settings and haven't been able to pull up this part of it, but this is important so it can like pinpoint where you are. This is like super not where I am. I don't know where that is pulling up. Very strange, but I'm just gonna put my address in there. And just do an example point here. So this is where I live. Let's see, let's pretend that there's a tree here. And you'll put in the address and it'll move this point to wherever your address is. But you can also, if you're like, oh, that's not quite where the tree is, you can also like move the point a little bit too. So I mean, it's good to get it pretty much where the tree is, but it's not a super big deal if it's like a little bit off. But so that's sort of the first step here. And then you'll put the address in another time. So closest street number, name. If you're not sure, just try to get it as close as possible. So I'm gonna put that in here. Cool. Number of infested trees, pretty straightforward. How many trees do you see? And then notes. This is the big one. I pretty much always put a note in, like if it's describing the house, like red brick house, or if it's describing, if I'm not sure if a tree's on one property or the other, I'll put it there. If it's on the left side of the house, I'll put it there. If you're not sure, if you see like a weird vine and you can identify it, like put it in the notes. Just like I would say always put something in the notes just so that we're aware of kind of what you're looking at. So like side of house, big tree. Great. That's a good note. And then contact maybe with the homeowner. I mean, that's going to be no unless you're like in your own neighborhood and you know this person and you know that they, would be interested in having their vines removed. But I would say 9 times out of 10, that's going to be no. And then you click submit, and then that'll populate to this map over here. So it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing really that crazy. I think the hardest part sometimes is like the map with the location will like be off, but again, don't worry about that too much. That's why we have the address on there twice. Um, cool. All right. Um, so before I go into this, I just want to ask really quick, Jeff, if I can put you on the spot since you've done this before. Is there anything that you feel like you wanted to add or anything I missed, or if you just want to like talk about your experience surveying or just any tips you have for folks? Yeah, I just wanted to give you a second.
Sure. I really enjoy this work. It's fun, as Meredith was saying, because you just get to walk around and survey, and it's really low stress and it's kind of fun just to see, just to look around. And I would like to reiterate Meredith's point about how sometimes it's really easy to get sidetracked and go down another street if you happen to see a vine-covered tree a block away, and sometimes I've done that and it's led me pretty far afield from where I was supposed to be. But yeah, it's really you know a, not a heavy lift kind of job, and I think it's very pleasant, and especially if if you have a partner you like to walk around with and just enjoy the day. It's a great way of doing those things. I think the I had a little bit of trouble with the website thing tool because it kept resetting, and then I'd have to relog the password in, and so I didn't talk to Meredith about this before, so maybe I should have done that. But it's not hard to do it, and I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. I agree too. I also think it's a lot of fun. And if you like to walk anyway, it's like, why not just walk and count some trees while you're at it? So yeah. Um, Cool. Well, yeah. So now I'm just going to get to where we're going to be surveying. This, like I mentioned, is something that you can join me. I'm going out and surveying this whole month. I'll be there Tuesday through Friday in different communities. And so in a second here, I'm going to drop the links in the chat to those different surveying events that we're doing and give folks like a minute to sign up if you're free at all. So we're mostly doing this in Maryland, but I do have one week that I'll be in some areas in DC as well. So that's one option if you want to join these efforts and join me on a weekday morning. However, you can also survey independently. And so, this map shows the areas that we're eligible to work in. And so, my preference is for people to be surveying in these areas. I mean, if you go outside of the shaded area, it's not like the biggest deal, but my program's not eligible to work there. So, it's still fine to do that. Boom. So you'll see it's a ton of geography all over DC, all over PG County. There's some spots in Montgomery County as well, and even some spots down here in Virginia. So it's great to have data anywhere in these areas. It's going to help inform, our work and our work priorities. So totally fine if you're not able to come to one of these events, or if you're just like, I'd rather survey my own community and get some people on board with that. That's totally fine too. So I'll send this out to everyone so that you can kind of look around and see where's in and where's out. It's tricky sometimes, like, your community might get cut in half and you're like, shoot, that's kind of annoying. Or like maybe like you live just right in one of the white areas and there's like purple around you. So if you're able to get out there in these eligibility areas, that's better for me. But yeah, just wanted to pull this up to show some spots where you can survey independently as well. Um, Cool. And then I just put a note in here too that, in terms of where we've been working with this program, I'm just finding that there's a lot more invasive vines in spots that are near parks or big green spaces because that's how they tend to spread. So if you live near a park or a green space, that's probably you're going to find more trees with vines there as well. So just be thinking about that too if you're going to be surveying independently, maybe considering those spaces. Um, Sweet. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I'll hold questions in just a minute here. But first, I'm going to just drop in the chat some links for our upcoming survey events. So this will go in order of the weeks starting next week. So like I mentioned, we're doing Tuesdays through Fridays, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. You can sign up for two separate shifts. So there's like a 9 to 10 and then a 10 to 11. So if we could just all take a minute or two and take a look at those events, and if you have time and you're able to sign up for them, please do that. Or maybe just take 2 minutes and think about another time that you could go out independently and do some surveying. Hopefully these links work and they're not all like mushed together into one thing. Okay, I think they're going in there. And then I'll just put a plug into while we're taking 2 minutes and looking at our schedules here. I have another event coming up next Saturday that I could definitely use a few more volunteers for. So if you're looking at this, I think I put it in as the last one there, maybe. Let me see. So anywho, if you're not available on weekdays, but you want to come out on a weekend, that would be another great opportunity to sign up. And let me just check and see if I have this link or not. Okay, yeah, it was the last link that I dropped in there is the one for next Saturday. So the first three are survey signups, and then the last one is the park event.
Meredith, if you'd be open to it, would you be willing to send those three last links separately? I am not able to open them for some reason.
Hmm. Let me see.
Yeah, I had the same thing. The last three wanted me to log in.
Oh, I see. Okay, let's see here. Give me 1 second. This one should work. I'm gonna send them all separately.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So those are the survey events, and then I'll pop the park event in there too. Oh, so this is the event next Saturday. It's that last link that I just sent. And I'll send these all out as well in an email too. So if you need some more time. Give it one more minute and move on to questions. All right, cool. I see some signups coming in. So thank you guys for considering that and helping me out with these efforts. And yeah, again, feel free to, email me if you want like an assignment that's independent or, you just want to know where's a good spot near where you live. I'm happy to help sort of coordinate those efforts as well. But yeah, in the interest of time, let's move on to questions. So what questions do you guys have for me about anything I just went over?
I have a question about whether to count a tree when it's completely covered with a blanket of vines. So does that mean you can't see any branches beyond where the vines are? Or could you just explain the reasoning there a little bit more?
Yeah, so I would say if it's covered in a blanket of vines and you can't tell what's going on under there and it's at someone's house, I would still count that because we don't know whether that tree is dead or alive. I think usually the instance where I don't count that is if it's like in a park and it's one of those like huge kind of stretches you see where it's just like it's all just like a big vine ghost, mostly because I just wouldn't really want to send volunteers in there. But I think if it's one tree on people's property, there's a higher likelihood that that might still be alive under there and that we could do something about it. So I
Okay.
would count that. Good question. Anyone else?
Is there any other than English Ivy, is there anything else you guys are looking for or that would be easy to kind of pick out
Yeah,
at
it's
this time of year?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, you can still see the hanging vines, so I will like when I'm walking around, I'll count if I see porcelain berry or another type of vine hanging off of a tree. But it's trickier, right? Like to tell kind of what you're looking at this time of year. So I think for the purposes of this exercise, like I usually just tell people just to look for English ivy. I guess winter creeper is the other one that you might see and think it looks pretty similar to English ivy. So that's the other, kind of evergreen vine that we might be looking at. But yeah, I haven't actually found too much of like other types of vines in people like in residential areas. I think, the different types of vines you see more in like a park setting. But yeah, uh, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. Cool.
In terms of surveying solo, which I think I may have to do. The map that you showed us, is there like a way to know where surveys haven't been done yet and need to be done the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, this is like my whole life is like comparing these two maps, the census tract areas and then my vine removal tracker map. So you can look at those side by side and see where surveys have been done and where they haven't been done. And yeah, also if you just want to email me and let me know like where like what community you live near if there and I can let you know if there's like one that we're considering prioritizing in this year. Yeah, that's a great question. Someone without a GIS background, man, I have learned so much about GIS in these past couple months. I'm just staring at maps all day. All right, other questions? Okay, all right. Well, thank you guys all for attending. I'll send a follow-up email with all this information, all these links, these maps, the upcoming events and whatnot. But as always, feel free to reach out if questions come up. And yeah, happy surveying. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye all.